Well, hello there and welcome back to our brief set of videos on the ecumenical councils. What did the council achieve? How is that council relevant for our faith today? Today we are in the city of Constantinople in the year 381 CE, and we're getting ready for the Council of Constantinople, which has been called by the emperor. We're going to see that the council will solve three issues. First of all, it will affirm, once again, the Creed of Nicaea. Now, that's a major issue because during the last 55 years, many issues have been wrestled with and worked out in relation to that creed at Nicaea some years before, and to reaffirm it then shows that those council fathers had gotten it right. A second issue that will be dealt with is the Holy Spirit. Who is the Holy Spirit, and why does the Holy Spirit need to be affirmed as a person and as God? Third, the council is going to condemn the teaching about Jesus by a bishop named Apollinaris. That's what the council is up to. Let's see how this develops. Now, we remember from last time that in the Nicene Creed, that term monogenes, only begotten, was affirmed by the council as good biblical language and necessary for understanding the relationship between Father and Son. The Father begets a Son eternally. That Son necessarily is eternally equal with the Father, because like begets like. But then there's difficulties in language. The term homoousios. The Father is of the same substance as the Son is of the same substance as the Father. But what exactly does that phrase mean, same substance? Or, at the bottom, we saw that the Holy Spirit is mentioned but not really developed. We don't see how he relates to the Father and the Son. And we saw that the term hypostasis and the term ousia, which will later be understood as persons and being, seem to be synonyms. They're used in the same way. But for good Trinitarian language, we know we have to have three persons, three hypostases, and one ousia. And so those terms are going to have to be separated over the course of the 4th century. The first problem, no doubt the biggest problem, is the use of that term homoousios, of the same substance. You see, in all the lexical meanings in the dictionary for the term homoousios, not one of them seems to fit right to describe the relationship between God the Father and God the Son. We could be talking about homoousios in a generic sense, something like three members of the same family, or three giraffes here on this picture. They're all giraffes, so they're of one substance, but they're individuals. Now, we couldn't say that's the way God is, or that would be tritheism, to have God as three separated individuals who share the category of godness. That's tritheism, that's not Christianity. And so we don't want to say that with the term homoousios. Or we could say that homoousios means numerical identity. That is, something like water is ice, or water is steam under different conditions. So we might say that God the Father and God the Son are the same being under different circumstances, but that clearly is modalism. That heresy has been condemned at the Synod of Antioch in the year 268, and certainly we don't want to go back to that. So we can't apply that meaning of homoousios to Father and Son. Or finally, we could perhaps say that homoousios means of the same substance, like there's three parts of the same thing. There's three piles of dirt, for example, and each of those piles of dirt is the same as the other piles of dirt, just as much, just as heavy, came from the same place. But that doesn't work with God either, because God is simple. God is not composed of parts. And so none of these uses of homoousios seem to really rightly capture the relationship between God the Father and God the Son. And as this term is wrestled with in the middle of the 4th century, many theologians, many pastors, many good Christians I think that's the wrong term. We need to get rid of the term homoousios so we can think better about God. The council just simply got it wrong. The result of the council was unexpectedly chaotic. Council fathers thought they had fixed the problem. They had written up a creed in order to show that Arius must be wrong and that the Father and Son are equal with each other, but all kinds of different views began to emerge. On the one hand, and maybe in one extreme, were the modalists who came back. They said, well, Father and Son are homoousios. They are absolutely equal with each other because they're simply different manifestations of the same God. God the Father looks like God the Son in certain situations and looks like God the Spirit in other situations. And so, hooray for the Council of Nicaea. It brought us back to modalism. Now, clearly the church didn't want to go in that direction. On the other extreme were the Arians, who kept pushing their argument: if God is simple and absolute, then the Son cannot fully be God. But in between those extremes were a number of very well-meaning positions. Each of them had very important things to say. First came Athanasius, who insisted on that term homoousios. If we say anything less than homoousios, the Son is of the same substance with the Father, then we make the Son less than the Father, and then we become Arian again, says Athanasius. But, worried others, how then do we distinguish between the Father and the Son? Wouldn't that slip us back into modalism, perhaps? And so a group called the homoousios group emerged. They said the Son is like the Father, as much like as possible. Notice what they're trying to do. They're trying to show the equality of Father and Son as much as possible, but also show that there is some difference between Father and Son so that we don't fall back into modalism. And then there was another group, the homoousios, or somewhat like group. The Father is somewhat like the Son. Now, they tend to be closer to the Arians. They tend to be more subordinationist. The Son is not fully the Father, but they're trying to emphasize the distinction to make sure that we don't become modalists again. All of these groups had something to say, and each of them were battling for position against each other, arguing their point, trying to make their theological case heard. Right about the time of the Council of Constantinople, one of the great theologians, Basil of Caesarea, writes in a book on the Holy Spirit, "This is what it was like over the 4th century, and I've lived to see it. Imagine a naval battle with its fleets fully engaged. A huge storm erupts and darkness falls. The fight is desperate and utterly confused. No one can tell friend from foe, let alone who is winning the battle. It was sheer chaos. And in the midst of all of the chaos, this issue did begin to get sorted out. Now, the first step was taken by the homoousios group. They decided to side with the Arians. And in a council in the year 360, a local council, they pronounced the Creed of Nicaea to be dead. No more Nicene Creed. And they deposed a number of bishops and put in their own Arian bishops. This was far too much for both Athanasius and for Basil of Ankara, both that homoousios group and for the homoousios group. They decided that they must begin to work together. In the year 362, they responded with a council, a local council again, of their own. This time, this was in Jerusalem, and Athanasius really steps forward here as a leader. He shows that both the homoousios and the homoousios group could work together. They actually are trying to say the same thing. So we need a way, Athanasius says, to distinguish the Father and the Son from each other, while still affirming their absolute equality with each other. And what will end up happening after Athanasius dies is that the term ousia, or being, or essence, will become used to denote the oneness of God, And the term hypostasis, persons, will be used to show the plurality in God, so that God will be understood as three persons in one essence. One God, three persons. The second issue that needed to be dealt with was the doctrine of the Holy Spirit. Remember, in the Creed of Nicaea, the council simply said, and in the Holy Spirit, nothing else. And that needed to be worked out if Father, Son, and Holy Spirit were going to be seen as a triune God. The key questions that needed to be asked were, is the Spirit really a person? After all, the Spirit is mentioned many places in the Bible, but maybe just as a force. Is the Spirit really a personal being? And secondly, then, if the Spirit is a personal being, is that Spirit a divine being? Is he equal with God the Father and God the Son? Interestingly, up until the year 350, Jaroslav Pelikan tells us there really was absolutely no full treatise dealing with the person of the Holy Spirit. All of the focus had been on the relationship between Father and Son. Gregory of Nazianzus, for his part, is forced to recognize that the issue is not that clear, and he says there's much disagreement about this. Of the wise men among ourselves, some have conceived of the Holy Spirit as an activity, simply a force of God, some as a creature, sort of Arian there, some as God himself, equal with the Father and the Son. And some have been uncertain what to call him, and therefore they neither worship him nor treat him with dishonor, but they take a neutral position. Well, mainly through the work of Gregory of Nazianzus and Basil of Caesarea, the Church does come to a very clear understanding of the person of the Holy Spirit. Is he a person? Yes. The Spirit is treated like a person throughout the Bible. He can be lied to, he can be resisted, he can be insulted, he can be blasphemed. And sometimes he is called a he. Remember, pneuma in the Greek is a neuter word, but sometimes it's a he in the New Testament, and that seems to indicate personality with the Holy Spirit. Furthermore, the Holy Spirit has all the attributes that are attributed to a person. The Spirit has a mind, the Spirit has emotions, the Spirit has a will, the Spirit acts like a person. The Spirit teaches. The Spirit bears witness. The Spirit leads. The Spirit intercedes for us. The Spirit sends. Certainly, this appears to be a personal being rather than a force. Well, then, if the Spirit is a personal being, is he really a divine being equal with Father and Son? The Spirit, it turns out, is called God or has the attributes of God many times in the New Testament. The Spirit is called God. Ananias, why has Satan so filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit? You have not lied to men, but to God. The Spirit has the attributes of God. The Spirit is eternal. The Spirit is omniscient. The Spirit is omnipotent. And he's omnipresent. His presence is everywhere. Certainly characteristics that only God could have. And for Gregory and Basil, last but not least, the Spirit does the works that God does. And that seems to prove that he is fully God. The Spirit creates, the Spirit regenerates, the Spirit sanctifies, the Spirit convicts of sin. These are things that only God is able to do. So in the end, then, at the Council of Constantinople in 381, the Council reaffirms the Nicene Creed by restating it in almost exactly the same words. Notice that first point about the Father is the same, both in the Nicene Creed and in the Creed of Constantinople. The section on the Son is almost absolutely identical between the Creed of Nicaea and the Creed of Constantinople. But then, notice the significance of the last statement. And in the Holy Spirit, it says in the Nicene Creed. But here, a little more is said. And we believe in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, who proceeds from the Father. It's our biblical language for the relationship between Father and Spirit, who with the Father and Son together is worshipped and glorified. Now, if we're giving them all together worship and glorifying them all together, they must be God altogether, who spoke by the prophets. The council doesn't quite say that the Spirit is homoousios with the Father and Son, but it certainly implied that the Father, Son, and Spirit are together divine because they're together worshipped and glorified. There's one more issue that the council will need to work out, and that's the question of Apollinaris and his understanding of who Jesus is. And we're going to get to that in the next section.